What is the biggest problem that you see in building a technology team when it comes to compensation?
I think for me, it's that the number's only half the story. A lot of people think that there's this kind of perfect number out there with respect to hiring, retaining, engaging, motivating, all those sorts of things. But if you come to someone and say, hey, we've just hired someone in a similar role, we've realised the market for your role has increased and we've given you a pay bump as a result of it, that is so impactful. And the jump between what they're on now and what we think they're worth is too big. And it's like, yeah, because you've been underpaying them against what you're saying, you should be paying within the market. I think it was this week, actually, I saw something about ComBank with their, they've got some sort of AI tool that tracks how long people are in the toilet for. And it's like, really? Like, are we really there?
That was Matt McFarlane. He designs compensation for startups and scale-ups for a living through his business foundation. Previously to that, he ran the people function at Oyster, while it went from 250 to 650 people in a single year. He understands tech companies and he understands compensation in technology as deeply as anyone I know in Australia. And you can't have a podcast about building tech teams without talking about salary and compensation. Matt's got some really sharp takes. He thinks that equity in Australia has stopped doing the job that founders actually think it's doing. He thinks the number that you're arguing about is the least important number of the offer. And today we get into what Australian tech salaries actually pay. What does it look like right now? And where does the token budget start eating into the people budget? Here's a conversation.
Welcome to another episode of Building Tech Teams in the age of AI. And today's episode we have Matt McFarlane from Foundation. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, man. Good to be here.
Mate, compensation in tech, compensation in startups better than anyone else in Australia.
Yep.
Let's go straight into that. What is the biggest problem that you see in building a technology team when it comes to compensation?
I think for me, it's that the number's only half the story. It's a lot of people think that there's this kind of perfect number out there with respect to hiring, retaining, engaging, motivating, all those sorts of things. And actually what I find is that obviously the number is important and it's got to be the right number, but as important, often more important, especially once someone comes on board, is what's behind the number, how did you get to it, how do they understand it, how does it make sense to them? I think there's so much inherent mistrust with respect to compensation. And so the thing I often find companies stumble on when it comes to pay is just there's no rationale for the number. Someone's negotiated for it, or they've plucked it out of thin air, or a mate in the ecosystem has said that this is what the role's worth, but there's no like fundamental kind of underlying basis towards it. And then it becomes hard to explain, right? Which when you're starting to build a team, things like pay equity come into play. People want to understand, why the number, how do they grow the number, how do they move within the pay system at your company? And so that's where I see a lot of companies fumble the ball.
I want to get your advice on breaking it down from start, go to woe, but you just mentioned mistrust there.
Yeah.
New person comes in, They've negotiated well. They come in on a higher salary than somebody else doing the same job or the same title.
Yep.
It's already there, providing value for the company.
Yep.
How do you see this play out? What's your advice around that? Because if this new person joining is the person they really need, valuable in the market, they want them, they need to pay what that person is. Do I then just go and bump the salaries of everyone internally? How do I play this out? Yeah,
it tends to, the first half of it definitely always plays out the same way, right? Like it always comes to light. Everyone talks about pay. Australia was late to the game in banning pay secrecy clauses, which was your ability as a company to put something in the contract that says, James, don't talk about your pay to anyone else. So it's a free-for-all. People can have a conversation. You can't penalise them in any respect. But it was happening anyway, right? So this new person coming in on a higher salary that they've negotiated is now creating what is termed pay inversion. So you've got your kind of incumbent person who's been there for a couple of years, knows the ins and outs of the business, the product, has the relationships, has the context. Invariably, you would say that they're worth more to you than that person who's just come in off the street and has joined the business, and yet they have got a higher salary. So it always comes to a head. It always does. And so, I always encourage companies to get ahead of that. I mean, if you're in the market for a role and you're finding that the salary that you're paying for someone who's doing the same job internally has shifted, the value of that person internally has shifted as well. And there's this concept called a replacement value, which is that all of that context, those relationships, the familiarity that person who's been there for 2 years has, is worth more. And so theoretically, if you value that, you should, bump that person even higher than the one you've just brought in. But it's the name of the game, right? Like, I think a lot of companies think, oh, let's just see if we can bank that upside until it becomes an issue. But by that time, the trust's gone, right? And you have so much of an opportunity to, have someone think, hey, you care about me, you've thought about this, you've got my back. Like, I've had this happen to myself personally, and I've been fortunate to be in a business where I've had the chance to do this as well for people. But if you come to someone and say, hey, we've just hired someone in a similar role, we've realised the market for your role has increased, and we've given you a pay bump as a result of it, that is so impactful, and the trust that it builds, and the fact that someone's like, oh my God, I don't even have to think about it. I don't even have to kind of go to bat for myself. I can get on with my job, and I know that you've got an eye out for me and the market and the value of my role. And, it's so much more empowering and better for that person.
But also challenging from a commercial perspective. How often am I doing that? Each time I make a new hire, am I then upping the rest of my team? It becomes hard from a budgeting perspective, I imagine, when you're at the moment, especially with AI salaries changing the nature, and we'll dig into that.
Yeah.
How often should companies be looking at this, rebalancing of it? Is it every time we make a new hire? Is it every 6 months, every quarter?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's look, I think minimally it needs to be every 12 months.
Yeah.
Like, you need to have an eye on the market for the roles that you hire for. You need to understand what their clearance rates are. I think some roles, obviously AI engineers or anything AI at the moment is probably on a faster cadence. So maybe every 6 months to every quarter. But this is where often, like, I work with HR teams and often interface with talent acquisition teams. I think one of the mistakes is to rely too heavily on market data as well. And it's great, it's helpful, it's an important signal for what's going on. But you've got to understand the source of that data as well, is that it's coming from companies who have already hired those people. Maybe those people have been in that role for a couple of years. Maybe their salaries haven't kept up with the market, but then you've also got the other end of the spectrum, which is people that are coming into the role today and what the market's paying right now for that role. And so you really, as a company, need to be listening to all these different signals. And so quite often what I'll see is that a company might have a 12-month cadence that they're reviewing their salary data and having a look across the organisation. But 6 months into the period, they're finding that the salary rates that they've got aren't getting candidates, or it's not getting the calibre of candidates that they want. That to me says, okay, we need to take a look at this now, because ultimately they're there to do, one thing, which is hire and retain people. And if the salaries aren't doing that, then they're not working for you.
Mention the word retain there.
Yeah.
Counteroffers.
Yeah.
I work in recruitment. Counteroffers obviously comes up. Not my favourite part of recruitment. But keen to get your opinion. Would you ever advise a company on a counteroffer, on making a counteroffer?
I think there's so I don't, by default, I tend not to love them, but for the same reasons. I think typically I see the kind of people that you're counteroffering are the people that you probably haven't looked out for traditionally. And it's probably the person that has been doing the job for 2 years and you've hired someone in,
Correct.
brand new for more than them. So they've been given some reason to leave and maybe they've gone looking and something like that. So I think in those sorts of circumstances, in all of my experience, has never been worth the counteroffer. They end up leaving 3 to 6 months later anyway. And maybe the company has their stuff together and they're able to piece together some sort of transition plan, but I think the person's checked out and they're ready to move. So in that sort of circumstance, I don't think the counteroffer is often worth it. I do think it can be worth it in circumstances where someone's been approached.
Completely agree. I've seen a counteroffer work a couple of times. I obviously don't like counteroffers because most of the time I'm the person involved in taking the person out of the company, having approached them. But I know some people have been counteroffered and been successful in staying there because they weren't actively looking.
Yeah, they're not checked out. They've had a realignment to their value, and they're going, oh, okay, if I'm worth more, and if they bring that, to the business, and again, like if the company's got a pretty good setup and they're looking at salaries annually, but there's always someone that pays more money.
Yeah.
If for them they go, okay, well, we've realised that this is too big of a risk for us. We do want to address it. Then I think in those circumstances it's okay. But again, I think it comes with the not the baggage, but the expectation that if there are others in that role who are performing similarly, you should probably be passing that along to them as well.
Yeah, and I don't think most of the time when I've seen it work, it's not even a money thing. But what it does, it creates the opportunity for a conversation on why you'd actually look externally, even if you weren't actively looking, you'd been approached. And it might be, what does my career look like? Oh, this was going to be greater promotion. It allows that discussion, or fast tracks that discussion internally to say, here's what it looks like if you stay. And we could fast path it grows to boom, boom, boom. So if I reverse it all the way back then, you come into a company's looking to grow, they're looking to scale their technology team. They're bringing you as an external consultant to help them. How does the process start? What does this look like? I think as teams scale, very early on, it's willy-nilly. It's, I need this skill set. They tell me this is what they're worth. Or this is what they'll join for. We offer that. At some point, you've got to bring some form of alignment to this, or some form of planning. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like getting clear on what it is that they're looking for. I think it's very easy to get caught up in the game of titles as well. And I think especially at early stage, titles can form a currency as well. It's very easy for a startup that is maybe, not as flush with cash as some of the others out there to go, oh, let's call this role, a CTO or a principal engineer or something like that, when maybe the person's a mid or a senior. And so suddenly you've got the title, but then suddenly what tends to follow is the comp expectation. So I think it's getting clear on what that looks like. What is the actual role that we're looking for? Where do we expect to hire them from? Are we hiring them from Anthropic or OpenAI, or are we hiring them from a mid-tier player or something like that? So I think understanding where it is you're looking to bring this talent from, because these are all the signals that you need to understand to work out the roles we're looking for, what the talent market is, and where we need to kind of calibrate ourselves from a salary perspective as well. But for me, that's like the key sort of starting place. And then I think you really want to start to think about like what your philosophy is around pay, because I think you're starting to bring a bit of structure that you need to implement within the business. Maybe you've already got some employees in the organization. You want to start to ensure that you're starting to bring some consistency to how this works. And I think a lot of people they think that it's like this big complex thing sometimes, when even something as simple as a 3-level, junior, mid, senior kind of framework just gives you a little bit of a sense of like, okay, what caliber, what's the hierarchy here of the roles that we have, and kind of where do they link up with the market.
And there's so much to that as well. Like, as simple as that is, like defining internally what a junior and a mid is, and then what do I need to do internally as a tech professional to actually go from a junior to a mid.
Exactly. Yeah.
Where those blurrings
and it's such an unlock for the team to have that clarity as well. I think some people think it like, oh, look, it introduces bureaucracy and all that sort of stuff. It's like, no, it's clarity, right? Like, people just want to understand where they are in the business, what their expectations are, how they get about doing it, if they want to grow, how they do that, what their value is, all those sorts of things. So it just helps clarify a lot of that for people.
For a lot of companies, a lot of people teams, a lot of founders, startup founders, this is not a priority.
Yeah.
I want to grow the business. I need more customers. My technology's not working. I need to build more scalable, more secure platform. At what point do I bring in somebody to own this function?
Yeah.
Let's say if I'm a startup, let's start with startups. At what point do I hire an external people person to come in to be part of my team?
Yeah, it's
Chloe from Airtree has an opinion on this as well.
Yeah, you'll have to tell me afterwards what Chloe's number is, and then we'll see whether or not I align with it. I think it's I don't know what the perfect answer to this is. I think I think a good talent partner is probably the most important, because for me, in those early stages, getting one wrong hire can be really bad. So I think that aspect is like where you want someone's skill set to be if you are looking for like a people professional. It's funny, I was just thinking, like, when I first started my business, I was like, I'm going to work with companies that are like 50 to 500 headcount, because I feel like 50 is about the right time when sort of compensation starts to become a little bit of a pain point, and 500, they don't really have their own like dedicated compensation person. And then what I've found over time in the couple of years that I've been doing this is that actually the pain isn't really felt until 100. 50 is really when it's like a good time to be getting these sort of structures in place, and I think is probably a good time, maybe a little bit earlier, where you want to be having your first people person come in. But 100's when they like the lack of structure really starts to bite them, and the pay equity and the counteroffers and the negotiations and all the inconsistency and the what do we pay for this role, that's when it really starts to hurt them. So I guess that's an indirect way of saying, it feels like that 50 mark is probably the good if you want to get ahead of it, it's a good time to get someone in to come and own that, rather than you as the founder or you as the senior team to be having to, look, I think they should always be hiring, but, there's so many other people things that can take their time and attention away from the priorities that you mentioned, that having this professional to help them with. And it's so much more accessible now as well. I mean, we've got fractional HR professionals. That's been a massive, I've seen that boom in the last couple of years. So it doesn't even have to be a full-time person. And I'm seeing that fractional marketplace really take off. So you could even go earlier, to be honest, and have someone, when you're at 15, 20 people coming in and building some of these formative practices before you truly need them. And they, from my perspective, are worth their weight in gold, because they just undo so much of the headache that's coming down the line.
Yeah. Chloe's opinion was most companies hire the person too late. And I agree, because that first people person, the people function is so big as well, right? I do the talent recruitment side of it only, and I wouldn't touch the game that you play in. There's just too many complexities to it that I don't know, that I don't understand. And that's where the fractional piece comes in, I think, because hiring an internal talent person to start with, I think, is the first best move, because you're only as good as the talent you've got, right? And if you can get better talent because you've got somebody that focuses and specializes in this area, great, it's going to accelerate it. But having the expectation that that talent person has the same skill set that you do is too big an ask of a people person, right?
Yeah.
It's too big an ask of one person to be your head of talent. You have to do all the HR. The HR operation is just massive.
Such a diverse function, right? Yeah. It's you're right. The talent side of things itself is enormous, especially these days, right? You've got candidates that can send off 1,000 applications with a click of a button. On the other side of it, so volumes are blowing out. I'm sure you see this a lot at the moment. So the job there is bigger, but then the rest of that HR remit, I mean, it's onboarding, it's, learning and development, it's engagement, it's leadership, it's comp and benefits, it's, offboarding, it's all these different things. It's huge. It's a huge role.
Yeah. And I think the other way, because of those different aspects of it, is, as you said, to partner. And we see that from a recruitment side. You either have a recruitment partner, external recruitment company, or you've got somebody, so like a company that's working with you ongoing, and you've got that partnership where they're an extension of your team, similar to yourself, where you're an extension of their team, owning one function.
Yeah.
If you take it to that next stage, you come into a company, you're helping them sort of get the lay of the land. What's the next best practice for them? Is it just setting up those roles, setting up the clarity in the conversations? How do companies then go to embed this so then we're sweet ongoing?
Yeah, okay. So past, sort of secondary to the talent function.
Yeah.
I would say for me, the next sort of big priority, I would say, I mean, it really depends on your strategy. If you're doing massive scaling, it's onboarding. It's how that person comes into the business, how they familiarize themselves with the context of the business, how it works, the product, what's their place in it, how they're contributing. It's how they're getting from day one to fully up to speed and delivering as quickly as possible. So the last role I was in-house for, in the first year we grew from 250 to 650 people. And so onboarding was everything. It was, how do we get these people situated ASAP? If you're not growing that quickly, then onboarding is still important, but I think it probably becomes more around ways of work. What's our kind of, and by that I mean I see that as another word for culture. How are we ensuring that who we are as an organisation and what our operating system is, and how we ensure that we're clear about what our goal is as a company, how it is that we're delivering it, what steps we're taking to arrive on it, what everyone's role is and how it connects to that. I think focus. I think that's one of the big challenges I've seen lately with a lot of companies, is that AI has been this incredible thing, and I can spin up a product or a vibe-coded product in seconds and minutes now. But what I'm hearing from a lot of teams is that it's causing this diffusion of focus, because people are suddenly getting distracted by all these little passion projects, all these little things that they thought, this would be cool to try, this would be interesting to build, but it has zero relevance to the team and the goals that they have, and then ultimately what we're trying to achieve for the organisation, which I think for me is the biggest risk when you're small, and trying to find PMF, or you're trying to generate revenue or whatever it is. If you're not dead center focused on what it is that you need to do to get there, then that's your biggest risk.
Completely agree. I think I'm in the same boat as you. I've got ADHD, and I tell you what, chasing shiny
I think
things.
I probably do too, but yeah.
Chasing shiny things and building things.
Yeah.
I can do it a couple of nights a week past midnight, but I do need to catch myself and be like, what value is this providing?
Yeah.
And it's fine if I'm doing it just to learn and I'm doing it for fun, but if I'm building something from a business context, what value is this providing? And does that point or line up to the goals that I've set for myself? And does this, accelerate me on that path?
100%. Yeah, I get lured all the time into like, I'm back on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it now, because I feel like that's, for me, is kind of the melting pot of all this AI discussion. But I find myself regularly distracted by whatever the next thing is that Anthropic or OpenAI have shipped, and I'm like, I've got to go try that. And I'm like, actually, what does this even do? Yeah, it's like, how does this even help me? I'm just playing with this thing because I can. And I think the other risk is that it's really good. It's really easy to get to 90% of something with AI or vibe coding or whatever, but that last 10% is quite hard. So you just end up with a whole litany or a graveyard of like these half-baked ideas that don't actually end up being that well. So yeah, I think that for me is a big risk.
Yeah, for company, just have that alignment. For those that don't know, you've got your own podcast, and I'd listened to an episode that you did with head of people from Zapier.
Yeah.
I mean, if you talk about culture, you talk about how well they've embedded that and the clarity around we need AI fluency with the people that join our team. It starts in the interview process, accelerates through the interview process as part of their onboarding, and then the ways of working. So I think that clarity that you mentioned just before, and they do it as well as anyone.
Yeah, that was a very eye-opening conversation, with arguably one of the most AI native companies in the world. And I loved in particular, and I think this is one of the things that I think a lot of companies are struggling with at the moment, is that I think they're throwing AI licenses at companies and expecting immediate upside, but they're not doing a great job of scaling whatever those individual practices are. I was having this conversation with someone yesterday, another people professional, about how AI is doing good things for like personal productivity, but the second you start to think about that in the context of the companies, that where they're struggling is how they're scaling those things. And I think some of the stumbling blocks companies or some of the obstacles, I think, to that being successful for companies is like creating, protected time to actually understand how AI can be used. They're not creating like the culture or the rituals around how they're sharing best practices. I think often it's this kind of top-down approach, which what I loved about the conversation with Zapier is that they've kind of got this top-down but bottoms-up approach. So they've even got their executives who are like, here's how we use AI, and here's what I stumbled on, and here's how it worked, and has anyone got an idea for how this is happening? But they're doing that across the business, whereas I see like a lot of executives in some companies are going, go use AI, and it's they themselves aren't necessarily getting that embedded in it.
Yeah, I was talking to a startup the other day. Lattice is the name of the company. They're very early days, but they're looking at essentially that, where they would set a layer over top of it, have a look at the different ways people are using AI internally, and then try to take the best practices and then create that consistency across the board. Because as you said, we've got power users over here that are using it for great, but then their skills aren't shared across the board, or they're using it and they're sharing a skill, but then when it gets updated, it's not shared. So it's like potentially having all these common skills in a GitHub repo, and then everyone can pull down from that, or creating that company brain if everyone can pull from that. So I agree. I think there's a lot of companies at the moment that have siloed individuals and different variances of it, and that next layer for a lot of companies, whether it be people function or otherwise, is creating that consistency.
Yeah.
AI, we're talking compensation. AI compensation at the moment is variant. It's changing day by day. Conversation last week's podcast, Adam ended up in an offer upward of 500, 600 plus, I believe is the range. He had offers from 220 to 300, mid threes for most of them. About 8 offers, I believe. Yeah. Ended up 600, got offered $500,000 USD to go to the US. Yeah. How do companies deal with this? How do companies hire these senior AI engineering roles? Principal engineers, AI architects,
Aussie companies. Look, I think those circumstances of that individual they're not commonplace. I think, in my experience, it's a rare breed of talent, but I think it's possibly a little rarer to see that.
He's definitely in the rare. If I'll push back then, if I go senior AI engineer who's going to come in and change the nature of your team,
Yeah.
or you want to change the nature of your team by bringing in this talent.
Yeah.
How do I go about hiring this person if I'm competing out there with the likes of the labs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to my point a little bit earlier. I think you got to understand what the impact is that this person is going to have in your business. Like, you taking a bet on something that's going to have this, $10 million in upside. I mean, if that's the case, then $500,000 in salary is probably not that big of a hit. I think a lot of people get in their head about salaries. I sort of heard this term the other day about, and this for me is like one of the most common reasons I see someone being paid what a company thinks is the right salary not do it, is because they go, oh, the jump between what they're on now and what we think they're worth is too big. And it's like, yeah, because you've been underpaying them against what you're saying, you should be paying within the market. So I think a lot of people see like I was working with a client the other day and they go, oh, we want to pay 90th percentile for our talent. Oh, but it's going to be 80 it was a UK-based role, £80,000 to bring this person up to the band. That's too big of a jump. And it's like, but that's the size by which you've been underpaying this person. If you want to be a 90th percentile company, that's the gap between, what you've been banking as an upside as a company, and that's the size of the reason for you to make this change. It's not, yes, it's easy to look at a number and go, oh, that's too big. But that's just the number. Like, we all want to be data-informed companies, and yet we look at something like that and go, oh, hang on. Yeah, so I think we need to take the emotion out of it.
Yeah, it's the measurement part. You mentioned it again. As you said, if companies can actually measure what the value is, or the upside is that this person's going to bring, if you can measure that, as you said, everyone's becoming data-informed, then you can actually make the justification to say pay $500,000 or whatever it might be for one of these roles.
And these people are spending probably hundreds of thousands of dollars on tokens and on the infrastructure, and payroll. It's the reason I think for the massive jump in and the spike in salaries for this kind of segment of roles is because payroll's always been in SaaS has always been the biggest cost. Maybe AWS has been up there as well, but tokens are now kind of superseding that, and I think it's giving companies the freedom and the permission to go, well, we're dealing with now an infrastructure that's worth significantly more, and we want to make sure that investment is sound and secure, and we've got the right people that are dealing with it. I know, was it last week? Was it Dario from Anthropic was saying, oh, I'm worried that people are joining now for the money and not for the mission. That's crazy to me, but so look, that's always, I guess, partially the risk. But as long as you think you're hiring for the right reasons and you've got a dialed-in process. But yeah, I think like if you're looking for one of these roles, like that's the clearance rate. That's what it costs for your business to be able. That's the cost of doing business.
Yeah, you mentioned cost and vision there. I think that's a really important one, or mission vision. If you want to compete on salary and salary only, it's a really quick way to blow out your cost base, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these people in demand, the top talent, it's not only a salary conversation, it's a mission vision. You need to actually sell that. Where have you seen that go really well? Have you seen companies that you've worked with be able to pay, let's call it market rate, not under market rate, but be able to compete for that top level talent that they might not be able to get if we're competing on salary alone?
Yeah, definitely. Yep. I've worked in those companies as an employee. I've worked with those companies who have been my clients, definitely. And I think it's the ones that, again, going back to that kind of ways of work and being really hyper clear about what your mission is, what you're trying to achieve, how you're going about it, and I think the environment that you're doing it in. Those companies definitely outperform, right? Like I think I mentioned we're in an environment where trust is quite low. I think it's such a low, there's so much low hanging fruit around creating a great environment for companies. Again, just clarity around what the role is, ensuring your leaders are good and kind and supportive and all those sorts of things. Like there's so many things that from just an operating environment you can do well that can offset the need to spend huge amounts of money on salaries. I mean, some of the more extreme cases that I've seen with a client of mine, for example, was a 4-day work week, fully remote. Like these things are these things are really important to people. So I think if you can factor those into your kind of EVP, then you're going to have an easier time of hiring those people and not necessarily have to go and pay crazy amounts of money as well.
Just open the door for me. CGT.
Yeah.
A big way for startups, scale-ups in the past to compete.
Yeah.
For the top talent was to offer some form of ESOP.
Yeah.
SaaS valuations have gone down across the board. those shares potentially aren't worth as much as they might have been in the past.
Yeah.
Also getting to that exit, more challenging at the moment for a lot of companies, especially in SaaS. How are you seeing this play out if you take that really valuable lever that startups and scale-ups had in offering ESOP? How are you seeing this play out at the moment?
I'd start by questioning the value of the lever, and I'd be curious for your perspective here, but I've always found that in the Australian market, equity has had like negligible impact. I think it's table stakes. People expect it, but they don't understand it. They don't know its value. They don't understand how it's going to grow. They're not connected to how their role impacts its growth. They're not kept in the loop by the business about the value and how it's growing. So I think, and we're in an environment where unless you know someone from Canva, Atlassian, Eucalyptus, any of these companies where someone has actually profited and benefited from an ESOP program, you tend not to think too much about equity. And I think this is the gap. It's funny. I'm bullish and I'm bearish on equity. I think in Australia it's a hard thing to get right because so many companies kind of just give it to you as part of your offer letter and then you never hear about it again. And that's a huge miss because I think a lot of companies spend a lot of money to set up the legal and the financial framework to be able to issue equity, and then they just forget about it. And so the whole point of it creating this kind of ownership mentality and for people to be bought in as much as the founder is, that's what they're there to achieve. That's a total miss for companies because they just go, you've got 10,000 options. And then off you go. So it's you're right. Like the environment for equity is worsening. Definitely. I think I saw some numbers from Carter the other day saying that the average duration it takes for a startup to exit or list or whatever has blown from 8 years out to like 15 or something. So that horizon is huge now. Like that's a third or a quarter of your career. Are you going to be with a company like anywhere near that long? Are you prepared to wait that long to see the return? So I think it just diminishes the value that people have on ESOP even further. And then obviously you add in the uncertainty in the Australian environment. Am I really going to see even as much of a return now with the changes from the recent budget? So I think all of it's going to result in, and what I guess I would encourage companies to think about is like, if the equity's probably going to be worth less to people in their mind, then think about how you can offer an even more outsized grant to fewer people, potentially, your more important people.
I agree with that 100%. I think bigger chunks to fewer people.
Fewer people, yeah.
Those people, as you said, are the ones that are going to change the nature of your business or have a chance to change the trajectory of your business.
Yeah.
Having those people more deeply bought in.
Yeah. But it has to come with that infrastructure, right? You have to tell them what it's worth. And every 6 months, you have to say, it should be changing in value every 12 months. Here's the update. But, how are we going on the goals that we've set to grow that value?
I think 5 to 7 years ago, there was a naivety in the market where there was some big SaaS companies that had massive exits, massive valuations. And people were like, I want to join a startup. I've seen Canva last year and I've seen the Ubers of the world, Airbnb and all that scale. Well, look at these valuations. I want to join one of them because that's my way as a software engineer to actually get some form of significant capital. But there's a naivety about how infrequently that happens, the path to getting there, dilution, all these conversations that if you don't look at it as a big picture or with some form of depth, you don't understand it.
Yeah.
But I think that was definitely used as a lever 5 to 7 years ago to actually attract people.
Yeah. But I think that ratio is switching now. I'm actually seeing, I see startups paying very competitively now.
Yeah.
And I think equity is still just that thing that people just like, whatever.
I completely agree right now. AI in particular, you can do a lot more with fewer people.
Yeah.
So instead of hiring 5 engineers, you can hire 3, potentially 2.
Yeah.
And you can
pay them better.
Pay them better. There's a time and a place to pay those overs. Mm-hmm. If you were to build a team from scratch at the moment, and you could be an internal team in a big organization, enterprise, right? I want to build a new platform, a new idea, new product to go to market, understand the customer really well. How do I go about building an engineering team if I give you $1 million?
How do I go about building it?
Yeah. Is it one person on $1 million? Is it the 0.1 percenter? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one, right? Because I don't know if you saw the news about ClickUp in the US.
Yep.
Big layoff, I think 40%, 50% layoff, and the headline item there was, we're not just banking the upside here, we're creating $1 million salaries. And then I think it was last week or the week before, they've put out a job ad for a CMO.
I wrote about it in my Substack. Just
$1 million salary.
Plug.
Yeah.
I've got a Substack newsletter. I wrote about that. The 100x marketer.
100x and no direct reports, agents, AI agents in the team. And so, I think, yes, there are these people out there. I would, of course, need some help from someone like yourself to find that kind of person who's worth that kind of money. But I think that's the thing, right? You can go and find 10 $100,000 engineers, or you can go and find $1 million engineer. And I think that's, you need to understand all the different, where are you finding that talent? Are you a globally remote company? Your talent pool is the world. Are you, localized to Sydney? Okay, it's going to be a little harder to find those people. So I think all of those factors come into play. And with that, once you understand what the talent is that's at your fingertips, then you can kind of work out, okay, well, with that composition, what are we going to be able to deliver?
I'll reframe the question. There's a time and a place, I think, if you've got your salary bands, that we blow it out of the water and go over and above somebody because they're going to change the nature of your business. It might be somebody can go to market at the moment. I think there's a really big space for the growth of the go-to-market specialist, especially if you're building product. That person's going to change nature, or that AI engineer. Is there a time that you come in and advise a client to say, this is worth blowing the budget for, this is the one, if you understand how this person's going to change your business, that it's worth, throw the salary bands out the window, you've just got to make the gut call on this?
Yeah, I mean, again, like if you've got a strong enough case for the bet and the payoff, then I think like at the end of the day, salary bands, they're good for the sort of, the broad range of roles that you're hiring for. But again, the data is like what is and has been rather than what you want to happen. And so I think if you're looking for this like game changer role in the market, then you'd be taking a very different approach. And I think if you're certain that this, if it pays off at this kind of a multiple, then if it's gonna cost that much to get that person in, I think it's, and again, I think this comes back to like where I see partners from a comp perspective, and I've made this mistake myself earlier on in my career, is that I think they sometimes hold too tightly to these salary structures and they defend them at all costs, and suddenly you're not able to hire the people you need in the business. Like again, they've got to enable you to hire and retain people, and if they're not, and your clearance rates aren't working, or people are leaving because of pay, or they're grumbling because of pay, managers are telling you that the market's moving on, if there's all these signals in play, then you've got to take a look at your data and adjust it, even if the salary survey that you're using isn't showing these sorts of things. Like at the end of the day, this is what's going to help you be successful as a business. So is it rare? Would you want to absolutely make sure you're sort of dotting the I's and crossing the T's before you make that kind of a call? Yeah, for sure. But it's got to enable the business.
When companies get to a bit of scale, when they get past 100 people, you don't need 10s the whole way across your team. Obviously, if you can get 10 out of 10, the studs in every single role, perfect. But there's a time to hire your 6s and 7s that are going to get the work done and keep it moving along. How do you go about advising companies when it comes to this? Like, I'd be interested in just getting your opinion on the formation of teams and being okay with this person's going to get their job done.
Yeah, it's I've heard it framed nicely in a book called Radical Candor, which is a good book I recommend people read around feedback and creating that culture. But they use this term called rock stars and superstars. Yeah. And I think it's right that a company needs both. The rock star is the person who's like a rock. They're great, they're great at what they do. They may be ambitious about how they do the work, but they're not necessarily ambitious for their career. They're not trying to become the CTO. They're not trying to become the CEO. They love doing their job. They want to be better at it, and that's kind of their focus. And then you've got the superstars, who are the people they're here for the big bets, the bold swings, those sorts of things. And you need those people too, because they do have these ambitions about outsized delivery and how they can grow themselves and move in the business. I think one of the things that certainly in like the SaaS space or in the technology space, it inherently attracts people that are in my experience, typically the superstars, the ones that want to develop enormously quickly. They love the greenfields environment. It's certainly one of the things I love about that space. You can come in, you can have a crack at something that hasn't been done before. You can potentially have outsized impact, all those sorts of things. But you can't have a company full of those people because, and you said it earlier, companies are staying leaner. Their structures are smaller, their ability to promote. I mean, I've been in companies that have grown by hundreds of people a year. You can be promoted, once every 6 to 18 months, and that fact is no longer the case, I don't think, in most companies. So you have to think about how you're giving people, the pursuit of challenge and mastery of what they're doing within the same role for longer, because that opportunity to grow is less common. So suffice to say, I think, I don't like calling them 6s and 7s in the sense that like maybe they're not as good or, something like that. I think, 6s or 7s in ambition, for, personal ambition maybe, for sure. But yeah, I think it's important to have a good mix. And I think increasingly we need that mix to come back more to the rock stars, because you need great people who are great at executing on their role, but aren't looking to climb the ranks necessarily. I don't know what the ratio is by any means. But yeah, I think it's some of the challenges that I'm hearing for companies, like, within this, we're having to rethink the career framework and promotions and all those sorts of things. There was a CTO I was speaking to the other day that was saying that he expects that the way people in his team, and he has his own AI research team, the way he expects them to be promoted is that they've built agents that have automated the level of the role that they're doing at that scope, and that allows them to move up. And it just fundamentally reshapes how careers are going to work within that like team, right? They're probably never going to hire a junior again, which is crazy. And then eventually those, and there's maybe 8 or 9 of them, they'll all just be principal level roles with a whole bunch of agents under them. So, it's there's no perfect answer just yet, but I think it's definitely reshaping the whole context of what, a team is and how it works and who you're looking for within it.
All right, there's 2 parts there I want to pull out. I'll go to that team structure part. Mm-hmm. You mentioned there's a part where somebody builds a bunch of agents to do what they're traditionally doing. Now your team structure used to be 10 people across the team.
Yeah.
It's now 10 people plus 5,000 agents.
Yeah.
When you're putting a hierarchy together, an org structure, you're looking at those agents and their token costs. Mm-hmm. Is this fitting in a technology budget? Is it fitting in a people budget? What does this look like? So, because as you said, like, tokens come with real costs now.
Yeah.
And if you're getting real output, like, these are things that people are starting to look at. And I think like a token max role, token optimization role will continue to be either part of core function of software engineering roles or potentially a standalone role like people have done in around cloud. But if you have a look at your total costs going out the door on the P&L sheet, your people line was one, technology would be another, but there's this blurring with the agents part.
Yeah.
Just be interested to see what you're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting space. Yeah, where's it going to go? I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go. A few things come to mind. I was at Sunrise, so Blackbird's conference, a few months back, and saw a talk by Greg Huntley, I think it is, the guy who came up with the Ralph Wiggum loop, and he was talking. His talk was all about how AI costs less than minimum wage, and I think we're seeing a snap back from that to now token costs are going to increase and all that sort of stuff. And so it's a hard question to know where it's going to go, where the budget sits. I mean, it's also like there's an overhead that comes with hiring more people as well. So, if those AI costs increase, I think like any vendor evaluation or any tool set that you use, you want to be relooking at every now and then to make sure that it's actually delivering the kind of value that you're expecting. I don't have a good sense of like how companies are going to control for, their token costs into the future. I think we're seeing some companies that are putting caps for people, per month spend, things like that. But as to whether or not we would see a transition back from like agents back to hiring people, I don't know. I think in some respects potentially, but there's also like, there's the on cost of hiring people as well, right? Again, an agent these are all the things that are on the billboards, right? They don't sleep, they don't ask for promotions, they don't ask for pay increases, they don't ask, so there is that cost that comes with having employees that I think is not caught up. So yeah, it's a roundabout way of saying it's a very it's a dynamic place or space at the moment. I don't know where it's going to go. But yeah, I think it's something that I'm certainly keeping an eye on in terms of what that shift is between headcount cost is going into token cost and whether or not that's just blowing out a different budget.
Yeah, and whether when you're having a look at your total people costs across the business, where you're actually incorporating those token costs into that people function or not, or if it is a standalone.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, you're having companies look at putting caps on people.
Yeah.
Which in one way looks ridiculous because if they're producing value off them.
Yeah.
If they're producing value off the tokens, give them more, right?
Yeah.
But if they're spending and doing the stuff that we're
talking
about.
Is it scalable? Yeah. And again, is it focused, right? Again, are they spending tokens on things that don't matter? And this is where, coming back to the incentive side of things, this is where the whole token maxing thing, it in the long term, it can be detrimental because I think I'm a fan of in the short term from a building and adoption perspective. I like leaderboards. I like being able to say, James, congrats, you were number one for this, this quarter that we've decided to bring AI in and we just want to see who's using it the most. But we all know how easy it is to game those sorts of things. And then suddenly you're just rewarding consumption rather than actual, producing value. And so I think they're an interesting tool. They obviously should not have a long-term place in companies from a reward and recognition perspective because I could spin up a loop right now that just spends tokens and would make me look brilliant despite achieving nothing. So yeah, these are the things that people need to be thinking of. And I think we're going to need to come up with new ways to evaluate whether or not the value of what an agent is producing for its token cost is equivalent to or more than what it would be to hire someone to do that same.
The measurement part's a part. It's a conversation. It's continuing and getting better at measurement. Organizations getting better at measurement. And then whether you're also model agnostic, you're moving to open, open models.
Yeah, the Chinese models are coming out.
These are the conversations, right? And then Meta released theirs, but obviously there's the pushback to the rise in people actually using the Chinese models because at some point you can't, as an organization, be held by just the global giants and being okay. Anthropic puts their tokens up where our costs go up by X, Y, Z. You have to be agnostic.
Which is why I think, I do question whether or not models are kind of becoming commoditized, right? There's so many of them out there now. They're all in a race to the bottom in terms of price. I think we are, yes, there have been price increases, but I think the pressure is downwards at the moment, especially with, the recent developments. But having said that, honestly, 6 months ago, I wouldn't have thought we would be where we are with things. And it's so hard to predict. So I think every company's just taking it, day by day.
You mentioned companies using, hey, you can come in, have unlimited tokens. We talked about ESOP. Both from an attraction and a retention perspective, what do you see companies do really well? Where's the best couple of people where it comes to attraction and retention outside just pure salary?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that flexibility piece is still up there in terms of the most popular, and that's not I think people conflate that with the remote versus in-office debate. It's not that. It's someone's ability to choose, right? It's this kind of sentiment that, and the companies that I see do this well are kind of remote first by design, but they might still have, offices and things like that. And what I mean by that is, simple rituals. For example, if you and I are on the same team and we're in the office together, and we're about to have a team meeting with 3 other people who aren't, we're still on separate laptops. That sort of concept where it kind of equalizes, it levels the playing field. Right, yeah. And well, they can be, but I find it worse when you and I are in an office together on one screen and then 3 other people and you and I having a kind of cross conversation. That dynamic just doesn't work in I think in the kind of hybrid environment. So I think it's those sorts of things that that companies look for. It's the ability to be treated like an adult and know that we all work so damn much, and I think, give people a bit of their own responsibility over their schedule about when and where they do it. And, I think we're all pretty well wired to know that if we're not doing our 40 hours, I don't know anyone that only does 40 hours, but if we're not doing it, then it's a different conversation. But
I think it's a measurement thing again, right? Yeah. You're measuring on output as opposed to just, hey, I've seen you in the office at 8:30.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was this week actually, I saw something about ComBank with their, they've got some sort of AI tool that tracks how long people are in the toilet for. And it's really? Are we really there? You've got people who are adults who you're paying to deliver a job, and you're tracking the time that they're at their desk, or in the toilet versus what it is that they're delivering. And it's like we've got the ability to see how people are working and track it and report on it in so many different ways, and yet we're resorting to these sorts of things. So yeah, I think for me it's that, right? It's like out with the big brother, out with the micromanagement, give people a sense of purpose, give people, a connection to what it is that the company's doing, give them meaningful work, give them ownership over it and the autonomy. And yeah, I think for me that's still the most compelling thing I see in the market outside of salaries.
If you flip it back to the individual side of things, you mentioned value before, you mentioned engineering, they're building a bunch of agents to do the job that they're currently doing to allow them to push up to that next level.
Yeah.
If you're advising individuals, technology professionals, how to advance their career, how to get more money without going to another company, getting an offer, coming back, counteroffer, we mentioned that before. If you're advising individuals, career growth, getting more salary, where do you start?
I mean, understand what you want first, like what's the dollar figure you're going for and why, like what's the connection to it, because I think it's only ever a temporary focus. I mean, I'm sure you've had this, I've certainly had this, where you get like a bonus letter or something, you're like, oh, that's really cool, and then you forget about it. So I think, you've got to understand what it is that it's helping unlock for you first in your own life. And then I think you've got to understand like what's the path to get there. And so for most people, I just encourage, like, first and foremost, have that conversation with your leader. Now, be conscious that your leader may not be empowered by their own company to understand how you can get a pay increase. But a good leader, and this is what I do with some of the work that I do with clients, is like, how do we equip leaders to understand how to take hold of that conversation and own it, even if they don't have the answer right then. I think often the biggest issue I see is that by the time, let's say you're my boss, by the time I come and have that conversation with you, I'm like, I've been thinking about pay so much and I'm so angsty about it that it becomes a bit of a heated conversation, and I expect you to have a response and you feel pressured to have a response, and it all just kind of turns to shit from there. So I think I'd encourage, like, if it's something that you're aspiring towards, just go and have a conversation with your manager. They probably won't know what the answer is right then and there, but a good leader will be like, okay, but I'm going to go and find out for you. We're going to work out together how we can get you a performance increase, to your base pay, or if it's a promotion, how we can define that, what the actual pathway is here. And hopefully that's one way you can do it. I mean, asking what the pay range is for your role as well. A lot of companies aren't at the stage where they even have a pay range potentially. If they do, sometimes they're not comfortable sharing it, but I think it's worth asking the question, and asking, where in the pay range am I? How can I get towards the top end of it? What are other people doing that are at the top end of their pay range that I could be doing in my role? So I think having these conversations is the best first course of action. And I think, even if it doesn't result in the outcome that you're looking for, at least your manager and potentially theirs now starting to think about, okay, this person's thinking about how they can progress. And if we're not able to scratch that itch, it's kind of a forewarning that they may start looking elsewhere. So, the tip after that then is there's so much information around, sure, ask ChatGPT. I mean, as a comp person, I detest, ChatGPT as a source, but ultimately it is scraping from a bunch of data sets. Where I think it can be helpful is if you're in a company that doesn't have any pay infrastructure, they don't have ranges, then ChatGPT is as good as whatever they've got, because they're not using any reliable data source anyway, and ChatGPT is just going to be coming from Glassdoor or Indeed or any of these job boards where there is job data and things like that. So I think, look at the roles that are aligning to the kind of salary that you're aspiring for, whether it's a promotion or maybe it's the role you're doing. I mean, I've certainly gone to my boss before and said, hey, I've been looking at jobs and seeing that all of these jobs which describe a higher level role than what I'm doing is describing the work that I'm doing today. Can I get a promotion? And that's worked for me in the past. So I think, understand where you are in the market and what's out there and what the market is calling the kind of role that you're aspiring for and what it's paying for, and use that as a mechanism for, growth internally. And then worst case, if you don't get what you need, then start looking.
I think old school, there was definitely when I was young, there was a mentality, and I was told, probably my dad, my early bosses, was do the job first. Go and do the job for that level above first before
it's a contentious one.
That mentality's 100% flipped.
Yeah.
And there's an entitlement
part
trend conversation that's been had in the market around, I'll start doing that job once you pay me for it.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your thoughts on that theme in general.
Yeah, I've been having this conversation a little bit lately because I think you're right. I think it is switching, and I was the same, right? Like it was, you do the job ahead of you, and then in 6 months' time you might get recognised for it, but you've been doing it for free a little bit for a little while, and it's a way for you to show your ability to step up and own it, and that's been the way it's worked. It's still the way it works by and large. But yeah, you're right, and I certainly don't want to characterize this as a generational thing, but Gen Z, I kind of like to say it's like, I'm a millennial. We like to talk about work-life balance, but we've all been shit at it. But I see Gen Z as being the ones that are like, no, like 9 to 5. That's what I work. And I think they're bringing a real sentiment around if you want me to step up into this role, then pay me to step up into this role before I start doing and discharging the responsibilities. And I don't blame them. I actually think in many respects this is a reward issue. I see people who get promoted into manager roles. I see people who get promoted into higher level roles. And do I think that they're being given enough of a pay bump to warrant it for the increase in responsibility? Probably not. And so I think Gen Z look at that and go, well, hang on, why would I be doing the job for free for 6 months to then get the job officially to then get a 5% pay increase? Like, is that working out? And so I think they're sticking to their guns a bit. And I think it's going to force like a pretty fundamental reshift, or a shift internally into how we do evaluate for promotion, because we're going to have to think of ways to, and there are ways to do it, but we're going to have to make sure that we're evaluating on the potential for someone to come in and do this job. I think we'll probably see things like, maybe trials or higher duties, that kind of concept where someone,
Paid for higher duties?
Yeah, I think so. Step up, do this for 6 months if you like it. Because I think the other thing we have to remember as well is that, there's that kind of heater principle as well, right? People feel like they have to take a leadership job or a management job or something to get the pay, but you just end up you end up promoting someone who's a great technical person into a leadership role who's terrible at it, and suddenly you've lost your best technical person and you've got a mediocre manager. So I think
I love the trend that sort of going anti that as well, in the fact that you can start to earn significant money in technology while staying technical.
Yeah.
I'd love that, as opposed to, as you said, you had to go, for going software engineering, you either had to go to an architectural route and stay super technical, or you had people management route.
Yeah.
And not all software engineers are great people managers.
Exactly.
Or don't want to.
And again, in this world, and even in the people function, I think you can now have a bunch of, AI agents or something that allow you to remain an individual contributor and be highly, highly technical and really proficient at what you're doing for at a more senior level and be paid for it rather than forcing you up this leadership route. So I think all of these things need to be true in organizations, increasingly so as Gen Z makes up more of the workforce. Or they don't. I don't know. No one's hiring juniors anymore, apparently, so we'll see.
No one was hiring software engineers 6 months ago, and now software engineering's going north again because people understand.
Yeah, it's all swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
We'll need to have quality software engineering practice.
Yeah.
And not just vibe code everything.
Yeah.
You mentioned this then, the difference between people management and the technical side of things. If we relate it to the people function itself, how important is it for the people function themselves to become somewhat technical when it comes to AI? Zapier, obviously, all in.
Yeah.
I've talked to other people.
Yeah.
Who are, it's about the people side of things, and we don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
Where are you seeing those trends change?
Yeah, I mean, we started this conversation by talking about how broad the HR function is. I think it's getting broader. Companies like Zapier are an incredible example of how they're leading the way on AI transformation, so the ways of work across the entire business. So that's a whole new portfolio that they've never had to. I mean, fundamentally it's change management, but it's with a technology that's just so different to what they're used to. I was chatting with someone yesterday about the increase I'm seeing in the role of the people engineer. So someone coming into the people team who is an engineer and is basically helping to deliver what might have been a vibe-coded product from a HR professional, who are now, I think, moving into this semi sort of product manager role. They're able to spin up a concept for something that is a people tool set.
Yeah, I've heard it referred to as talent engineer.
Yeah,
same
and
function.
I've seen. Lovable obviously can afford to do it. They've just recently done it. GitLab, I think. here in Australia, Safety Culture, Leapsome, which is a HR tech brand. Like there's a few companies that are starting to look at this role. And what I find hilarious about this is that we've never had this kind of talent in the role before, but now that we've got AI, which arguably you would think, oh, wouldn't that just give the people team the ability to kind of deploy something anyway? But no, it's actually created more of a need because now the HR team is able to spin up all of this capability. Plus, I think there's an expectation that they're starting to become leaner and automate more and things like that. So yeah, it's an interesting space.
I think it's a similar concept to the forward deployed engineer when you're having like going to a company actually, roll things out. Like I think this will go into most functions of a business where you have somebody who is that something engineer and the most technical person, and it might be somebody that comes from a talent background that's just really lent into Claude Code. Or it might be somebody from an engineering background that's really learnt the people function.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the impetus there for me is that yes, people teams become more technical. I think this has always held people teams back is that they haven't been as technical and I think as commercial. Of course, the human side of it is always going to be important, and we don't want to lose that. But I think it's just going to continue to see a further broadening of the function, and I think we're going to see, like my background's been more people operations, so the more systems side of it. So yeah, I think now's one of the most exciting times in the existence of the people function because the capability and the expectations to help drive this transformation across the business have never been greater. And I think it's just, it's placing that more value on that function than ever before.
And I think if you get that part right, the people ops part right, you're automating more of the ops, the day, and you get to do more of the good people side of things, the human part of it. I mentioned before that you've got a podcast and you've got a newsletter.
Yeah.
You've obviously done that from a personal branding perspective. There's a lot of conversations out there at the moment, especially in startups, about founder-led brands and the greater importance of founder-led brands in go-to-market, in selling.
Yep.
I think there's a same trend for internal engineers actually creating a personal brand because it does help them from a career perspective. Love to understand why you went down this route to start with. Let's start there, and then I'd love to see your recommendations and trends that you're seeing for technical people.
Yeah, okay.
To actually do this.
Yeah, so I've always been very bullish on brand. And so when I left being an in-house people professional and started my own business, one of the things that I was certain I was going to do to win new business was to be seen as someone who is like a trusted partner in the industry, someone who knew what I was talking about with respect to compensation and benefits, and that I was going to focus on generating leads through that avenue rather than like cold outbound. So for me, having been in the role that I now essentially sell to, I used to wake up every day and I'd have 5, 6, 7 outbound emails from some company that I would delete, and I knew it was the same for every other person in my network. It was you constantly being sold to, and it was done really impersonally. And if I reflected on the companies that I did buy from or the people that I did work with, it was because I either knew of them, they came recommended to me, there was some kind of like warmth there that I don't have with the people that just show up in your inbox. And so for me, the approach there was very much to lead with LinkedIn to start with. All of my network is there, and it was very simple. It was I went and paid one of the like LinkedIn influencers that sells LinkedIn courses, because I was like, I know how to post on LinkedIn, but do I really know how to turn this into a system that generates leads? No. So I went and paid for a course, and it was really eye-opening in terms of helping me create, first and foremost, define who I am and what it is that I do and who it is that I'm talking to, the goals that I have for it, the content that I want to generate for it, how I create a system of generating that content. And so I just began starting to post, and the idea was that how can I kind of reflect on the challenges that I've overcome from a compensation perspective, that I know that the person that I want to talk to is going through, and how can I give them that little bit of advice or insight or whatever. And that was working really well, and I really liked it. And I kind of got to the point where I was like, I'm sick and tired of kind of talking about comp from my perspective. I know there's other companies out there that are doing great things from a compensation perspective too. I want to start a newsletter, and I want to platform them and some of the interesting things they're doing. The podcast kind of happened really accidentally. I was like, I'm just going to email these people with a bunch of questions. I'll get them to reply, and then I'll put it in a newsletter. And then I was like, actually, maybe I should interview them, because then I can, double click on stuff that's interesting. And then I was like, well, I might as well record it. And then suddenly I was like, okay, well, now I've got a podcast. So I've kind of got this whole ecosystem now. And I couldn't recommend it more highly to anyone. I think, it's obviously, we've never been in a time where it's easier to generate content. But I think for me, what you can achieve when you do it for a sustained period of time, and people can see the authenticity behind it, and they can see that it's not AI, and that it's, and that you're tackling problems, and that you are actually like giving value for free to people, it starts to build trust. And I think in many respects, that's one of the moats that I see between, to develop trust in an environment where there is a saturation of AI content, is the fact that you can go to my newsletter and you can see that I've published 45 or whatever editions, and you can read through them, and it's something that I've been going at for a while. I'm having conversations, all those sorts of things. And so I think from that perspective, it's been super helpful. And I've documented this. I've talked a lot about it. I'm 3 years into my business. I do $500,000 plus in revenue as a solopreneur. I credit all of that to my brand. And yeah, I couldn't not be more of an advocate for it. And I know we all love to hate on LinkedIn, but a lot of the success of my business has come from just, talking on that channel and building relationships and building my network and kind of going from there. So yeah, I'm a big fan of it.
There's a couple of points you've mentioned there. I think the authenticity is the big one, and being okay with it not being perfect, but just having an opinion. Consistency that you've done it time and time again. I think what's overlooked, it's very easy for you or I that run our own businesses to obviously do this and try to build a brand. But I think for individuals, founder-led brands obviously because of their own company, but for individuals, if you have a look at, again, I'll call this show sponsored by Zapier, the Zapier internal tech HR team and talent team, like their individual profiles on LinkedIn have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, like views, and they write great content. If those people ever wanted to go and work somewhere else,
in a heartbeat,
pick up, right? Yeah. Solid software engineers that talk about what they're building at the moment, the problems that they're going through, the challenges that they're facing. Sometimes the things that fucked up. Like having those conversations online and being able to build a brand or talk about that. Again, when you're going and looking for a new job or getting tapped on the shoulder for that big pay jump, I think it's really overlooked.
100%. And I think if you think about the issue that we mentioned before that is facing companies, is that they've got 1,000 CVs sitting in front of them. The ones that are backed up by someone who's got this portfolio of blogs or whatever, even a GitHub or something like that they can showcase some of the things that they're dealing with, stands heads and shoulders above that sort of a thing. And I think it works wonders in a bunch of different ways. I think it's someone who's within the team may not be necessarily trying to sell, like you said, but what it does from an employee brand perspective, I mean, the fact that people can kind of talk about the challenges they're facing internally, it just adds another dimension to the sort of careers page that someone might see, and I think attracts the kind of people that want that challenge, want the truth of what it's like to work in that company. Just want to understand what's going on a little bit more. And then you're right, on the individual side, I think it just makes them that much more marketable if they do want to go and do different things. And I think it creates so much opportunity for you to go and speak about it. Again, I've had so much opportunity come my way, not just from a business perspective, through the brand that I built. So yeah, it's a massive, I'm a massive advocate for it.
I completely agree. And I think, as you said, I think the other part there was like the individual side of it. Like there's obviously companies have marketing teams that will produce their company content and all the rest of it. But I think the real thing that's attracting people at the moment is that human to human part. Yeah. I might consider going and joining your company because I understand who you are.
Yeah.
And people buy into people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Speaking of people, you've got an online summit coming up.
Yeah.
Startup People Summit.
That's it.
Talk to me about what it is to start with, and then I want to know why you've put this together.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, so it's a one-day virtual summit. It's really designed to be the space for people, professionals from all flavors within the sort of startup, scale-up space who are building the people function, to have a place to come and see others showcase how they're grappling with the different challenges in that kind of sector, build community, build networks, all those sorts of things. So it's trying to be the space for not necessarily just the technology industry, but for the unique environment that I think startup scale-ups operate in. It's green fields. We're building stuff from scratch. In 12 months' time, the company's completely different. We're rebuilding it again. These are very different and nuanced sort of challenges to what you're dealing with at an enterprise level. And so I wanted to create a space to showcase that and give people a space to come and see what others are doing.
How's it go about a day job running your own business, then putting this together?
A lot of sleepless nights. It's full on. It's anyone who's run an event before. It feels like a never-ending job. I think it's done when the day's done. But yeah, it's a lot doing that, and then also having the consultancy. Plus, I mean, the newsletter and the podcast, as you well know, takes up enough time as it is. So yeah, it's definitely a full-time job.
Yeah, I think I've had a look at the content for it. I've signed up myself. Mm-hmm. I think they're whilst it is very targeted startup and scale up, I think there are benefits there for people that are working in people functions in enterprise as well, to have a look at the challenges that are going on, because a lot of it is, when you're in enterprise, you're still scaling teams as well. You may not as quickly, but you're still building those functions. And I look at a lot of the topics, even having a look at the AI in the people function and things like that, not necessarily just scale up, startup only. So I think, to give you a quick plug, I think there is a lot of value in that for not only people within those verticals.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's funny. I think actually the startup scale-up environment has started to sort of stretch to that enterprise space. I mean, we're seeing more and more pressure on that kind of caliber of company. So yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the challenges that we're going to cover in this event are ones that are increasingly relevant to enterprise teams too. But I also wanted to have a space where people like what I was doing when I was in my job have a space that's for them, as opposed to some of the other conferences that tend to be a bit more for the sort of top end of town.
Mate, any one trend, one thing that people that are looking to build or scale a technology team at the moment that should be looking out for over the next 6-12 months, one thing that they should be worried about or keeping an eye on?
Good question. I think it just comes back to that focus piece. Like, don't get distracted by all the bells and whistles. I think just be considerate about it. I think I see one of the struggles I see for companies is just being there's a lot of pressure to perform and deliver, and I think it how do I say this more eloquently, but basically, don't lose sight of what it is that you're trying to achieve, and just be a bit more thoughtful about what it is that you're delivering in terms of outcomes, and how you're embracing new technologies like AI. Don't just knee jerk and expect great outcomes. So yeah,
appreciate it, mate. We'll link it up in the show notes. But anyone that's looking to solve the challenges in around compensation, scaling these teams in that space, will look out for Foundation.
Appreciate it.
Cheers for your time today.
Good to be here.
Here's my biggest takeaway from my conversation with Matt. Matt said the most common reason a company refuses to pay somebody what they're worth is that the jump feels too big. But that gap is exactly the size of what they could be getting elsewhere. The market's been flat for the last couple of years across technology, and most roles is pretty flat. But there's a few roles that have jumped significantly, namely around AI. And if you're a founder or if you're a CTO, my question for you this week: pick the person on your team that you'd be most damaged by if you lost them. The person with that intricate company knowledge, really tight skill set. Figure out what they will get in the open market today. Understand what you're paying them. And if that gap is significant, I think you should be having a conversation internally with whoever that matters, whoever decides on salaries, compensation, what it would cost you to lose that person. If that cost is significant, I bet that they understand what they're worth on the open market. Maybe it's time for a conversation with them to look at what you can do to look after them, even if it's out of your normal pay cycles, even if it's outside of your normal conversations around pay increases. You don't want to lose your best people. The market's just changed in some of these areas. Sometimes it pays to be proactive. Hope you enjoyed the conversation, and I'll see you next week. This was the Building Tech Teams podcast. We release new episodes every Tuesday. Really keen for feedback on guests you'd like to see, more topics you'd like to see in depth. If you'd love to provide any form of feedback to me, find me on LinkedIn, James MacDonald AU. You won't miss me. This episode was produced by Day One.